Owain Yeoman and Tim Kang aren't real cops, but they're
TV Police!
the TV Police.
Christmas Police with Nina Lopez Carrano.
Hi, guys.
Hey! Oh my goodness. What an amazing, amazing time to have you on. I cannot think of a cheerier, rosier holiday persona to have than the lovely Nina.
Yeah,
I do love Christmas.
that's right. That's right.
Talking of Christmas, I saw Chris Long. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Couple days ago, and we were at Jimmy Gadd's screening of A Winnie the Pooh Christmas. Just seeing Chris, I cannot say your name, Nina, without thinking of Chris saying it in my mind. Does it sort of rattle around in your mind in the same? Because every
Does
time
that
we refer
even
to
ring
you,
a bell? It must.
Nina,
Oh my God. 7 years of hearing him yell that.
right?
Actually, more
mean-
than that, because I was with him before we even started the mental.
Right.
I started putting together our whole mentalist family here, and I realized that you have a lot of mentalist family, right? So we recently did. I'm trying to remember which episode it was. The episode starring, you know who I'm going to say, right?
Julian Acosta?
Julian Acosta.
We were just
Who-
talking about him.
Just happened to be Steve Preciado, who we both agreed was probably one of the nastiest pieces of work to have graced the screen, certainly in season 1 of The Mentalist. And I don't mean that about Julian, who I know is adorable and lovely, but what an amazing, amazing character that was. And then when I was looking to see your sort of, distinguished, insane credits that you've currently been working on, I was like, wait a second. That's Steve Preciado. And to be this memorable, from a guest episode so many years on, all kudos to him. But Nina, welcome to the TV Police. What a
Thank
treat to have
you.
you. How you doing?
I am doing great. I'm so happy to be here. It's been so nice to listen to you guys go down memory lane. I'm shooting in Winnipeg right now, and we got here, and the rental that we got wasn't very homey, and I was I'm 27 weeks pregnant, so I was having a full meltdown, and Julian was just like, that's it. We're going to Walmart and buying a Christmas tree. And
Oh
literally
my God,
that
I
night,
love that.
we went and bought a Christmas tree and all the decorations, put the Christmas tree up, and my daughter was happy and I was happy, and we averted a full meltdown.
I love it. Congratulations.
Great.
Had no idea. That is absolutely thrilling. This is one of the wonderful things about doing this show, getting to check in with people who, we spent so much time with, and from assistant to executive producer, director, writer, probably national pickleball star. I don't know, anything else you want to put in there just to make us feel bad about ourselves? Remind me, Nina, you were with us pretty much from day one, right?
I didn't do the pilot, but I came on when Chris came on, so we started on episode 101. I guess that was
Amazing.
the first episode after the pilot. And yeah, I was there all the way until the end. So I was Chris's assistant, I think, until season 4.
Mhm.
And then I became a producer on the show. And then season 7, I directed my first episode of television.
First
Amazing.
episode of television ever.
Ever. Yep.
Yeah, on The Mentalist. That's great.
Everyone that we've had on the show to date has sort of given us a little bit of an overview of their journey to The Mentalist. Would love very much to hear about what that looked like for you.
I grew up in Michigan, in a small town in Michigan. I grew up in a mobile home, literally on the wrong side of the tracks. And so growing up, my brother, Sammy, who also worked on the show, he was in the writer's office.
Love him.
We both kind of were always making short films and stuff growing up. And my sister Ava was always a part of it. And then when I decided I wanted to go to school, I went to Full Sail, which was a film production school. The day after graduation, I moved out to Los Angeles with 8 of my dude friends. And we moved into this big house in Northridge. And it was obnoxious. It was like the real world, but I was the only female, and I was also the only one that got a job. So it was just beer pong in the living room. At one point they were like, can't we just bring the trash cans in the house so then we can eliminate one step? This is terrible. So I lasted 1 year, but I was working for the small production company called Freestyle. I was working there as an intern I wasn't getting any money. I also only had like $600 in my bank account. So I knew that I couldn't do it for very long. So I called one of my instructors from film school and I was like, this other internship won't pay me. And he's like, why don't you just call them and tell them, be like, I'd love to do this internship, but if you can't pay me, then I can't do it. And maybe they'll be able to. So I called them and I get the production coordinator and she's like, oh, we're really sorry. We can't pay you. So, okay, I'm really sorry. I can't come back. And then I'm like driving down the 101 back to Northridge, crying hysterically. And then I get a phone call and it's one of the producers at Freestyle. And Francesca was, hey, I heard you're not coming back, but we need an assistant. We can pay you to be our assistant. And so I was so excited. So I went back and I was their assistant for like a month. And then the coordinator, Barbara, was Chris Long's assistant on Dirt. And she wasn't going back. And she knew I wanted to get into television. So she was like, oh, you should go meet my boss, Chris.
Perfect.
So I went to Paramount and I met Chris and we immediately hit it off.
Nina.
Exactly. And so he hired me, and it was 2007, so it was the year of the writer's strike. So we started in, I think, September, and they went on strike in August. And like that was the worst thing that could have happened to the industry, but it was kind of the best thing that happened to me because Chris was the only producer standing, and he was like directing 2 of the 5 episodes we got slid under the door. So he really kind of threw me into a position of power, like right from the beginning. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was so green, you could die.
As we all were at that time.
Yeah, we were. So he had me like shooting inserts, and I was in post-production with Jimmy Gadd was an assistant editor at the time. And I was working on the cuts with the editors and kind of learning about television from the post-production side. And then at any moment that I had free, I was on set with Chris or watching the other directors, just trying to learn as much as possible. And Dirt is actually where I met Julian. He played one of the bosses there, and his character only took meetings in the nude. So anytime he was on set.
So you got a good look at the goods.
Yeah.
You're like, right, try before I buy. Excellent.
Completely butt naked. And the best part was my mom, I was 20. So my mom had flown out for my 21st birthday. And it happened to be a day that Julian was shooting, and he was doing one of his naked scenes. And so
Of course,
my mom's at Village, and Julian like comes up with like this robe on. And after he leaves, my mom's like, he is just so sweet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. I'm so embarrassed. And I'm not joking. For like 4 years, my mom would be like, what about that one guy, Julian? And I'd be like, Mom, he doesn't even know I exist. Like, I literally was wearing my hair in pigtails back then. Like, I was like a baby, and he was like an actor. And I was like, this is ridiculous.
Too funny. I think that's going to put you in a very small group of people who could say, my mum probably saw my soon-to-be husband naked right around the same time that I did. One thing that seems to be a real theme of talking to guests who've come on and describing their experience with The Mentalist was what a genuine family it was, and how there was this real sense of collaboration, everyone being in it. Was that your experience too?
Absolutely. I have not been on a show even come remotely close to what The Mentalist was. And I have to believe it had to have come from the top. It had to come from Chris and Bruno. I think they were just so good about cultivating talent and growing from within and giving people opportunity. I mean, so many people on the show went on to become like huge influences in the film industry. I mean, Rebecca Cutter started as Bruno's assistant, and now she's created multiple shows, and Woodruff has created multiple shows, and David Applebaum, and he was a writer. I started as an assistant. It's just, it's crazy. Jimmy's a director now, and I think that is because Chris and Bruno allowed us to grow on the show and also mentored us.
I think that was Ken mentioned something along those lines about how even the co-producers today don't know how to run a set because they've never actually been on set. Even Bruno would bring Ken in and just say, "Hey, go make this episode, do it." and
Yeah.
you learn by doing.
I wonder if it's more of a sort of British sensibility as well, because, one thing that did strike me when I first came to the States, the entertainment industry was a real business and it was taken very seriously. In the UK, certainly when I sort of emerged from drama school, there was a feeling of, oh, it's a hobby and let us know when you get a real job. You could tell people that you were an actor or that you were a producer and they would actually genuinely take that seriously and say, okay, well, this is a business and this is an industry. And so
I have the opposite, actually. I'll check that in a minute. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm finding it impossible to take you seriously with the deadpan face, the mustache, which adds the gravitas, obviously. But then these guys just
and you're gonna have to deal with it for the rest of the episode. Here we go.
Love it. That's interesting. So maybe there's just a different cultural perspective, and I'd love to hear Tim's thoughts on this too. But like one thing that I had noticed that
now
Ken
you're
had brought
making
up
me think
repeatedly.
about the reindeer horns on my head.
Don't.
Now
It's amazing.
I'm like looking at it, going, yeah.
I'm a guy firmly in a glass house here, wearing a one suit onesie with Santa on it. So I really don't have much ammo. The thing that Ken had remarked about the way that Bruno ran the show was that he was atypically generous and genuinely did want to hear people's perspectives. Did that surprise you as a newbie? Because I guess that's your sort of first learning curve, right? You don't know what to expect.
I don't, but because I had only ever been with Chris, really, I mean, I met Chris 3 months after I moved to LA, moved to LA, and I didn't know any other way. He just, Bruno and Chris both had this motto: responsibility is taken, not given. And so, for me, I always think of Mentalist as like my grad school. They let me learn the whole entire process, from being in every single meeting with the directors and going on all the scouts with the directors. I oversaw color timing. I went to every single final playback and gave notes on like all of the sound editing. Like, I was a part of the whole entire process, and that's just an experience that I have never seen anybody else get. And it is why I'm sitting here today, because if they wouldn't have allowed me that access, I don't think I would have been able to be as successful as I am. And the fact that they let me sit on set and learn from all of those directors over 150 episodes, I got to really hone in on, the things that I saw that directors did that I didn't really like or that didn't really work, in my opinion. And then the things from directors who I really loved, and there was so many great directors on our show, like John Showalter and Charles Beeson and Dave Barrett and all those guys who would, they were also a part of the mentoring process and letting me in on like how it's done. So then when it was my turn to step up, I had all these tools that most other people don't have.
Did you know early on that was going to be your trajectory?
When I started with Chris on Dirt, I did not. I don't even think I fully understood what a director was, especially not a television director.
Right.
But about halfway through our season on Dirt, Chris was like, you need to make a decision. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And so that's when I decided, like, I want to direct. And particularly, I wanted to be a producing director. I wanted to do what Chris was doing, because the part of filmmaking that I love is also the family part of filmmaking. And being on a show and being able to create the overall look was something that I really loved. So I would get to do both things. I'd get to create the vision, but I'd also get to be a part of the producing. And so I think it was really important that I got to spend so many years on The Mentalist and with Chris. So I got to figure out how to be a producing director very early on in my career, unlike other directors who don't usually get that opportunity until later.
Yeah.
That's a really important distinction, and one that might need a little bit of explanation for people outside of the industry too. Can you give us a sort of a quick layman's terms explanation of where a producer's role begins and ends, and where a director role begins and ends, and how a producer-director works?
And maybe some of the different titles too, right? Co-producer, associate producer, assistant producer. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
It does.
Executive producer.
So executive producer is a tricky one in television, because sometimes there's so many of them. So there's a writing executive producer, and then you have like someone like on The Mentalist, Chris Long, who was a producing director, executive producer. And our show was very traditional. Mentalist was a traditional show. Bruno ran the writer's room, Chris ran production. And that was the distinction between the two. Bruno was a part of all the decision making, but he really entrusted Chris's vision of the show. And, you know, Chris's responsibility as a producing director would be to help prep all of the directors that come in. We get a new director every single episode. You know, sometimes we would bring in like one director to do 3 episodes a season, but they were spread among the whole entire season. And on a show like The Mentalist, as we grow every season, as if you watch it, you'll see how the show transformed. The shooting style, we got into a groove, we started shooting it differently. And so Chris's responsibility is to make sure that every single one of those episodes, although are directed by different people, still feel like it's all directed by the same person. And so making sure everybody stays within kind of the rules of our show. And The Mentalist was a little different because every episode we went to a different world. So there was a lot of world building that got to happen.
I think what's interesting too in the rewatch of it has been how you can now sort of, with the benefit of hindsight, see how the show is trying to find itself too. So I guess that tonal point, that was Chris's responsibility.
It was. It from a shooting standpoint, it was. And obviously a lot of that's dictated by the writing that was in the episode. And as you can tell, just in the first, 13 episodes, the writers were really trying to find their feet in what the show was. And surprisingly, I think maybe what we considered in production was like our weakest episode of season 1 was the monkey episode.
Oh, Red Brick and Ivy?
Yes, Red Brick and Ivy.
Yes, you just talked about that.
It was so different from all the other ones. And I think while we were all shooting it too, we were like, oh my gosh, is this going to work? But it ended up being our highest rated episode of television of The Mentalist ever produced. It was
really?
number 1.
Even higher than Flame Red?
Yeah.
With Rigsby's arson appearance? I have a hard time believing that. I've got a plaque somewhere that shows us as the number 1 show with Flame Red on there, but I'll take you. It's so funny you should say that because Tim and I, when we were dissecting it, we found it hard to reconcile the more extreme elements like the morality engine. Yeah. He's been calibrated for evil. It was hard for us to even to get in and analyze, wasn't it? Sort of 20 years on.
It was really hard to analyze when we were prepping it too.
Yeah, that's so funny.
And I think shooting it, because Paris Barkley directed that one, didn't he?
Paris, yes.
Yes, it was Paris. Yes,
Paris did, and I remember shooting that one so clearly, like it was yesterday. And it was hard, but I think what we learned from that episode was it was like ultimately like it was like light and funny, and it wasn't like super dark. And I think people really needed that at that time. We were just, we were in the middle of an economic depression, and I think everything that was on the air at the time was really dark, like Cold Case. It was just about like all these like terrible murders and like, SVU, Special Victims Unit. Like it was really dark shows. And then this handsome guy with this blonde hair who just threw everything up in the air and tried to see how it fell together with these sidekicks that like had all this comedy around it. It was completely different than anything else that was on TV at the time. And I think America needed that at the time. And then the world needed it at the time.
That blue sky element that Owen talks about quite a bit. About
and I think
show.
We were really fortunate when our show went on air. It was a very specific time in history, and it hit, I think, because of that. And so I think what we learned from that episode, the monkey episode, was that if we make it a little bit lighter, then people might tune in more, and they did, and then it just became this huge hit.
Well, I had mentioned the fact that, and my word actually that we'll talk about later, my word for that was range, and the range of or the scope of storytelling that we were allowed to do on The Mentalist was going from the dead serious murder mysteries all the way to like a monkey episode and everything in between. And we can embrace all of that unapologetically, and people still enjoyed it.
Ours wasn't a sort of a genre show. It wasn't set in an alternate universe. Tim and I have often talked about it. It held together all the incongruities of life. Life can be funny, and it can be depressing, and it can be all of these things. But I also see it as something of a turning point in television.
Yep.
We were, afforded the opportunity to grow in what a lot of people refer now as the sort of golden age of television. And that's changed a lot, right? And I'm really interested.
Is that what they call it?
Well, yeah, the early noughties, right, were considered the sort of the heyday of television because,
it really?
prior
Okay.
to
I didn't know
prior
that.
to
Yeah.
streaming, it was network TV in its greatest, splashiest, most expensive form, and then of course it's all become very different now. So when you've had a proving ground in that kind of television, we saw the kind of copycats and the other legitimate franchises that were built off the back of us.
Yep.
How do you take that kind of training and now translate that into the hyper realism of something like The Last of Us, which you've just been working on, or the House of Dragon or American Hostage? Where do you draw from that?
Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset. But I think one of the reasons I was able to transition into it is because of what I learned on my time on The Mentalist and the crime procedurals I did thereafter, is because we have to shoot so efficiently in network television. One of the reasons why network directors usually don't get hired on higher end television shows is because they think we only know how to shoot in one way. But what I was able to do, because I had people that, helped push me forward, was show them that I can make what you're making, but I could maybe do it a little bit more efficiently than what you're doing
That's
currently.
interesting. Yeah.
Cheaper.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing because it's scary for them because that's not what they're used to doing. And so I got my first chance to do that on The Nevers, which was an HBO show created by Joss Whedon. And the reason I was able to get that opportunity was because of a network television show. I did multiple episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Joss's brother and sister-in-law were the showrunners on that show. And Joss needed someone to come in and do this, like, it was a whole different world building episode for The Nevers. He didn't trust anybody. And so they were like, you should get Nina. She's directed for us on S.H.I.E.L.D. and I think she'll really be able to take your vision and bring it to life. And so HBO at first were definitely not keen on me doing that. At the time, I had only done network TV. I was the producing director on A Million Little Things for ABC at the time, and they were very scared. And so
Really?
I was up in Vancouver shooting, and they're like, you need to come down here because I was going to shoot that episode during my hiatus in between seasons. And so I got on a plane and I went down to LA, and I met with all the executives at HBO, and Miranda Heller used to be one of the executives at HBO. So I had like kind of this little tie into The Mentalist that
Sure.
really helped me out in there. And then, they were super scared. I did the meeting. I did not think I was going to get it. And then, Joss really pushed it forward. And so I was able to get into the HBO world. But the caveat was they also needed the show to come in on time. Like, it had to be shot in a certain amount of days. All their
Perfect.
episodes had gone over at that point. So I really got my chance. But then the pandemic happened.
Oh no.
So
Right.
I shot one day, and then ABC wouldn't let me out of my contract, so I had to go back after the pandemic to A Million Little Things, which was fine because I prepped so well, and all the producers really liked me that after they got back up and going and my season of A Million Little Things was able to come, I was able to go back to The Nevers and do like their second season, which was really, that changed the path of my career because the executives really liked my episodes. While I was there, they basically offered me an episode of Perry Mason to do the finale block of Perry Mason while I was shooting The Nevers. So that was kind of like this amazing gift. But then I found out I was pregnant. So
Pandemics, babies.
Yeah,
What's
so
the
many
director
gifts.
got to do to get a
Yeah.
gig?
anyhow, they made it work. HBO actually and Warner Brothers, all of them have just been amazing in terms of like having a family and supporting females and filmmaking. And they broke my block actually so that I could still do Perry Mason and have the baby. So they've always been super supportive. And so I always really try to tell young female filmmakers, like, don't be scared to have a career and have a family because there is a way of doing it.
You're ultimately afforded these opportunities because you're good, and not only are you well prepped, but you're a joy to work with, and film. As actors, we're always pushing up against people's preconceived ideas. Oh, I knew one thing coming out of The Mentalist was that I wanted to do something completely different. So I called my agent and I said, I want to be swinging a sword, I want to sit on a horse, I want to be in a costume, I want to do something that feels like theater. And then I got the opportunity to do Turn and play Benedict Arnold. And the amount of people who then said to me, oh, Rigsby's playing Benedict Arnold. There is this preconceived notion, especially in television, that if you've played someone, you are in some way that person. Did you still feel like there was a sort of glass ceiling there?
When I started, it seemed impossible. That it
Right.
was like, oh my, how am I going to climb this mountain? Even with all of the support that I had, there was only so much I was going to be able to do, especially moving out to LA, not knowing anybody, you know, just like you guys. I wasn't in a film family. I didn't have
Sure.
anybody to turn to. So it seemed impossible. And at the time it was. I mean, if you just look at The Mentalist and how many female directors we had in our run,
Right.
I think I can name them on my hand. Martha
Yep.
Mitchell, Leslie Lincoln Glatter,
Leslie,
Roxanne
yep.
Dawson. It was like it was very small, and maybe they did 1 or 2 episodes a season.
Mhm.
You
Which
know,
is crazy because they were all so good.
So
yeah.
good.
Melody
Leslie
Ching
was
was a couple.
incredible.
Yeah. So it was hard and it was scary, and Leslie was always really amazing throughout, like, my
Leslie's
whole
phenomenal.
career. Yeah, I could email her, and she's been a mentor to so many successful female directors. It's crazy. You know, but it did seem impossible. And then there was this article that came out on Deadline. I think it must have been right around the end of The Mentalist, and it listed every show that was on air and how many female directors each show had, and their whole run. And right near the top was Supernatural, and they had 1 female director, season 1, and they were in season 10.
Right.
And so 1 episode directed by a female, and that wasn't uncommon. There was a lot of shows that were like that. They just didn't have a lot of female directors, and at the time there was like 10 female directors that were directing all of the shows, and 5 of them worked on ours. So it did seem a little impossible. I was super fortunate because Chris's mentor was Bob Singer, and Bob Singer was the executive producer, showrunner, co-showrunner on Supernatural. So when
Oh,
Warner
I
Brothers
see.
told them, you guys have to up your diversity in female game, Bob called Chris and he was like, do you think Nina would want to come up here and shadow? And that's how I got Supernatural. Exactly. He was screaming it all the way up from Vancouver. And John Showalter was a big part of that too, because John directed a lot of Supernatural, so
Oh,
he
yeah,
vouched for
John.
me as well. And so I got my chance to do Supernatural, and Supernatural was a key thing for me because it was visual effects and stunt heavy. And so at the time, I think there was also this stigma that like, just like they thought you could only be Rigsby, they thought females just had no concept of stunts and visual effects.
Crazy.
Why though?
Crazy,
Right? Like, it
yeah.
doesn't even make any sense. Yeah.
It doesn't. But it was the way that it was. But because I did a really good episode of Supernatural and Jared and Jensen and I really hit it off, it became a stepping stone for me. And then from there I started getting like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and The Flash and all these like bigger shows at the time. And it was able to help mold my career. So I wasn't just doing, most directors were doing just crime procedurals, right? They were from like the same 10 crime procedural shows. I was able to really venture out. I was able to do big, heavy visual effects shows, but then I could also pop in like 1 or 2 episodes a season of a crime procedural. And I think in my first 3 years out, I was directing like 8 episodes a season, which was the most you can do. And I was able to get a bunch of variety. I was able to get comedy in there. And that I think really helped when I transitioned into higher end television, because I had this body of work that was, more diverse than I think other directors at the time.
It's interesting the way you describe that higher end television, because I grew up in that same sort of understanding. So I came to LA a little bit before you, I think, and at the time there was still this sort of weird stigma that if in some way you were doing TV or favoring TV, then it was because you were a failed movie star or that you weren't able to make it in movies, which of course is ridiculous because then The World and His Dog wanted to do TV. And network television was where all the money was, no doubt. Not just for the artists, but that's where all the money was flowing, just economically, ad revenue, everything. But yet there was this prestige factor to HBO. So I remember when I got my first HBO show, worst paid gig I'd ever done, but it was HBO. I won't call it snobbery, but that perception still very much lives on today. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's interesting because when you're in it, it's exactly the same. There's
Right.
there's nothing
No.
different about it.
No.
The only difference is we have a lot more money and a lot
Sure.
more time. Whereas on The Mentalist, we were shooting 7-day episodes. I think we eventually got to 8 days. When I just finished House of Dragon and I shot, I think like 50
That
days.
little show.
Yeah. So it's like, it's just the amount of
Right. Can
time,
you
but
say that again? I didn't hear you, Nina. You
50
shot
days per
50
episode.
days per
Yeah.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was like
Versus
we
8
started
days.
prepping in January and we wrapped production because we shoot all 8 episodes at the same time. So directors like pop in and out. We wrapped mid-October. So it's like it's a much longer period for a much shorter amount of television. On The Mentalist, we were popping out, I think at their highest point, like 24 episodes a season,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
I'm
that's wild.
exhausted just saying that. I
Yeah.
can't even
That's
believe
wild.
believe it.
And that does that happen still today? I mean, Tim, what was your experience on Magnum like? You know, Magnum, another great successful network show.
Yeah.
Those seasons was shorter though, right?
No, they were in the same format. We were always aspiring to that 2022
They were still in that kind of ballpark. Yeah.
I mean, I think towards the end, they gave us we shot a full season, but then the release was over two seasons. Right. So they would take the 23 episodes and then get 2 seasons out of it. So they started to economize on all of it, at the end. So
Well, it's funny because when we started the show, I remember the British model being very much, at the time, The Office, for example, the British Office was
6
one of the biggest
episode
shows on the
series,
planet.
Yeah.
6 episodes, and everyone was like, 6 episodes, that's it.
Yeah.
And of course, I guess the commercialized American side of things was like, guys, you could make 600 here. Let's go, And kudos to someone like Ricky Gervais who stood his ground and went, no, this is the show. This is what I want it to be. Now, come full circle, obviously, where people are a lot more circumspect about spending money and they want the product to be as fully realized and most cost effective as possible. We're now in a place where 6 to 8 episodes seems like the norm, right?
It does, although, and it's funny, we'll see what happens with this new Warner Brothers merger, whatever.
Yeah, I just read about that.
But Warner Brothers is trying to go back in time. They're trying to reverse engineer everything. And The Pit has proved it to be successful again.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I wasn't interested in watching The Pit, but I did watch The Pit because I wanted to see what all of the craze was about. And there was something very nostalgic about watching a simple show. Yeah, it was. You were watching.
There was something nostalgic about watching
watching that same show. Yeah.
And now that's what they're doing. Like they want
with me, guys.
Yeah. They just bought 2
Isn't
more
that the guy
shows.
Star as well? Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't he in the hospital? Yes.
Same Star as well.
Location. Isn't it John Wells? Yes, but
Not the
let
same
me
show.
start by saying, I think the complaint has always been on the creative side. Can't we make something unique?
Something
Can't
new?
we make something new? And look, whilst the drive as an artist is to always create and find a new area, as we carved out with The Mentalist, you can also understand the tighter economics of like, well, if we're going to put $10 million into this, this is tried and true. It's a formula that we know we like, and the audience already like it. So I think there are arguments on both sides.
I have a question for you, Nina. As far as the 50-day shoot, I mean, I think it's it's obvious in the final product. It looks better, right? I mean, more money, more time.
Yeah, more tools.
More tools.
For instance, the difference between like the show I'm doing right now, which is a much smaller budget show. I'm doing it.
And what's the show?
American Hostage.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing 7-day episodes.
Okay.
Same scripts, same size scripts as we are doing on House of Dragon. Obviously we're not doing visual effects. We're not doing any of that. We're doing it more. I would say the budget is on par to what The Mentalist was when we were making The Mentalist, maybe slightly under.
You mean like in adjusted dollars, right? Like
adjusted dollars,
okay,
yeah.
And give the audience at home a sort of an indication of what that looks like. We're talking like what, $3 to $5 million an episode, something like that.
Yeah. Yes, we're just over 3, I think, on this, or around 4 on American Hostage. I think Mentalist at our height, like at the end, we were somewhere around 7.
Oh, really? Right.
An episode.
Yeah.
Something like House of Dragon is just so much bigger, but the days are shorter. I'm shooting 9 pages a day right now. I had
Mhm.
last week I had a day with 9 strips, 9
Wow.
scenes on on House
And is
of
that
Dragon.
dialogue heavy or is that a lot of
Dialogue,
action
yeah,
stuff?
dialogue heavy.
Right.
Yeah, it's basically a talking head show. Um, House of Dragon, if we had 2 scenes on one day, we were like fully stressed out.
Right.
Oh, really?
Right.
How are we
Interesting.
gonna make this day?
Right.
You know, but the coverage is different, right? We're composing shots and the blocking is more intricate. It's like it's just a different way of shooting, but also every crew adapts to the amount of time that you have.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if you have 6 hours to shoot 2/8 of a page, we'll fill 6 hours with 2/8 of a page. But then in this, you'll go to another show and you'll have 6 pages in 6 hours, and somehow you are able to do that.
It gets
So
done.
Right.
it just depends on how the machine is built.
Getting into the episode, this was a really, really fun one, I thought, and it was a
I did
typical
too. Yeah.
Dave Barrett style episode.
Yeah,
It had
right.
a lot of,
Barrett style episode.
yeah, it had a lot
Double
about
barrel Barrett.
a double barrel Barrett, indeed. Walk us through what Dave Barrett might have been walking through as a director coming into this episode.
Our pattern at the time was 4 days out on location and the rest on stage. So, I feel like
Interesting.
this episode had more days on location. There's a lot of location work in this episode.
I felt like Dave Barrett was quite a guy who always kind of was on location. Like all my recollection of Dave's episodes were down by the beach, because then he could do something spectacular with a flying camera. Or how many days then would you have ahead of the episode to get yourself ready for this?
7 days prep for an 8-day episode. So
Right.
he came in on day 1, and we would get right in the scout van and go out and start scouting locations. And we'd probably spend the first day scouting. And then day 2, we'd come back and we would do a concept meeting, break down the episode. Bruno would come to all of our concept meetings so that he can kind of give us a rundown of what he was seeing. And the writer of the episode would be there too. And then we would probably spend the rest of the day out on the rest of the scout to kind of shore up all of the rest of the locations. And then by the time we got to day 3 of prep, we were doing meetings all day. So costume meeting, prop meeting, art department meeting, stunts meeting. If we had any visual effects meeting, which would take up, most day 3 and 4 of prep. And then before you know it, day 5, we're out tech scouting and going back to all the locations with all the department heads, so we could, so Dave can show everybody what he wanted, what crazy stunt he was planning to do. But also, like, Dave never stops moving the camera. Like, the camera is always moving.
Well, he never
like,
stops moving as a human. My
Right.
one recollection of Dave is that he was always animated. So I
Always.
guess he translated that over into his style.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any experience, and I know Dave wasn't one of these, but did you have any experiences where a director came in and they had a very fixed idea of what they wanted and it just didn't jive? How do you deal with that?
It's hard to deal with that. We were very fortunate. I think we only had maybe 2 rogue directors, let's call them.
Okay. Okay.
And like, particularly for someone like Chris, who would have to try and like, bring that director back in. It's hard because there's a lot of rules around the DGA and what you can and cannot do. And at the end of the day, it's one director, one vision. So whatever that director chooses to do, you kind of have to go with. And it's hard, especially I think for actors, because every week you're coming in and there's a new director coming in and you have to learn their ways and how they're doing it. And everyone's trying to get to know each other, and you guys are the actors, but I would assume it's got to be incredibly terrifying that some new person comes in and you're putting it all out there and trusting that they're not going to make you look like an idiot.
The best directors can take that in their stride. But I guess the ultimate fix really is try and fix it in the edit, I guess, right? Or try and sort of get something that feels like the show in post, and hopefully you can get there.
Exactly. And then pick up pieces afterwards, to try and make it fit together. And I think that's why we kept on going back to people like Dave Barrett, like people who just really understood the show. I think Dave and you guys worked with him as actors. I feel like he really got the actors too and was able to draw really fabulous performances from everybody. I mean, in Paint It Red, it was a Cho Rigsby episode. Like, it was great, and there was some really amazing comedy beats in there, and I think he was able to bring that out and keep the audience active in the plot the whole entire time, because let's be honest, Painted Red was a little confusing with all of the
Oh my God. I'm glad you said that, because I felt like I was being a little bit slow on the uptake when I was watching it, because I had this with the monkey episode too. I had to go back and watch it a few times, and I guess that's also part of the appeal of our show. It's clever, it's twisty. You do have to apply yourself in a way that I think, you know, these days there's a lot more ADD TV where it's just like, let it wash over you. This was more of the age of television where it's like, you got to apply yourself. And if you want to be invested in it, coming into the episode, let's talk about our words.
The word that I used is cheeky.
Cheeky.
Nice. Cheeky monkey.
I thought the episode kind of lived, you know, like it was super successful because Simon was so cheeky in that whole entire episode, because there was a lot of world building in Paint It Red. I mean, we went to a small farm community, and then we went to like a Russian like
oligarch
party.
Lobster pool party. Yep.
And then, but also I was like, are we in a house or are we in a hotel? Like that was a little
because of the stairwell that Rigsby and Cho were in. I was like, how is that?
I still couldn't translate where we were in relation to that.
And then I was like, maybe it's not as confusing to the world because I knew the location. Like we shot that house in Encino, and so I knew like where it was. And then when you guys were like just waiting in the car in that like SUV scene, and you're just like in front of one of like Warner Brothers feature films, like that the like railing in the background, and I'm like, where are you supposed to be?
Where is that? Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? The difference between being an insider and like, because these are the things that are just lost on viewers, and they're like, you guys were just parked outside the house because that's where our imagination took us. All I can remember was picking up that scene in another episode. We'd run over, and I think that had to be a pickup, which is why I think it was done outside stage 9. But it was really random that night, and I remember the whole thing being done in such a hurry, and I think that's why it made it onto the blooper reel, because Tim and I were literally dragged from one scene and gone, you need to shoot this now. It's from episode 13. We were like, what was that? That painting? We're like, oh, okay, sure, fine, go. And so we shot it. Simon ran in, painting, hey, great. And then we went back to see, like, I don't know, later in the season, I think episode 15. It was a mind spin. But that's a wonderful segue to my word, which is fake. And I think that what is so wonderful about our show is that we're constantly debating what is real, what is fake. There's no such thing as psychics, but I think the art world, Tim used a reference the other week and I loved it. Sometimes the show becomes Jane, or it becomes a character, and I felt like that in its best episodes, The Mentalist manages to embody the spirit of Jane and the spirit of the show in the actual essence of the episode itself. Yep. And this was one of those. There was a lot of what is real, what is fake, but also with a wink and a nod. So like the moment when he revealed the picture, what I loved about it was obviously it's a fake, but in these days, so the lines between, so there was two great instances that immediately popped to mind, right? There was a very famous modern art display done at the Tate Modern in London, and they'd opened it up and it was full of all of the usual pomp and circumstance of, you know, and pretension, let's be honest, of fine art. And people gathered around this like exhibition in the corner, and they were like, it's just so real and urban and just so untouched and authentic. And what they were looking at was a pile of bricks. And it turns out that it wasn't part of the art exhibit at all. They were just rebuilding the back wall of the gallery. But someone had gone, you know what I love about this? It's just a real expression of class. And, you know, so to me, what is worth 50 million and what is not is so subjective. And I thought that the episode really beautifully captured that. And I think that using the art world was a wonderful way to be able to poke fun at that.
Yeah.
What was your word, Tim?
Mine was a little bit more on the nose. For me, the episode that I just kind of keyed on, and I think part of it too was because of having to watch the many layers. I did have to watch this episode a few times, but the thing that I just kind of stepped away from was relationships. To me, we kind of keyed in on all the different relationships that were in the episode, whether that's Cade and his daughter, which is that father-daughter thing. We hit on the Lisbon Jane thing again. We even hit on the Van Pelt and Jane thing, as well as the Van Pelt and Rigsby. And
Mm.
then we had, obviously, from the beginning, the Stevie and her husband, right? That was the big sort of, her dialogue was basically more about finding the killer of her husband. So
Mm.
all of those different types of relationships kind of stuck out to me at the end.
What was interesting again was to see how we've often talked how The Mentalist became a journeyman show for a lot of actors.
Mhm.
Seeing a young Darby Stanchfield
Yep.
pre scandal, like in it popping up in these little sort of roles. That's always fun. And I'm going to tell you it. Not only do we have a repeat of one of your favorites, Furtive, because remember we had Furtive and Longing, so there was some more Furtive, but there was a line where Simon said, "You were crowing like a cockerel in a dung heap." Now, like, I don't know anyone who says that, but like, just the way.
I mean, you made the defense of that, with the performative aspect when he's putting it on, and he. What did you mention? You said he likes to wax poetic. Now,
wax lyrical,
or wax lyrical, wax poetic, right? I mean, I think there is that to that degree, but it's also the stylized nature of our show. I've held that belief from the beginning, is that it is kind of stylized. Show sometimes doesn't even talk the way that a normal person would talk, and it's just slightly elevated.
When it comes to Jane, though, I noticed that the more insulting he gets, the more elaborative and sort of decorative he gets.
Yeah,
so it's almost always right as a prelude to getting punched in the face. Ken Woodruff claimed that as one of his things. Did you guys have active conversations about that in the writers and producers' rooms?
Yeah, I mean, that was like, part of
it became a running gag, right?
It's like, how far can you take Patrick Jane before he just gets punched in the face? Like, that was kind of
right
how it was. And I think a lot of that was Bruno. Like, Bruno's voice of Patrick Jane, you could tell when if we had a writer's draft that hadn't gone through the Bruno pass, because it didn't have I think all of those really iconic great lines came from Bruno, which is so hilarious because Bruno is just not that.
Also, while we're on the subject of wordsmithing, I thought that this was a great continuation of Tim had pointed out the ridiculous names that we quite often had. This one was great. We had Shirali Arloff.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to come to a point where you're like, do the writers just hate us? Because I could just see Paul Lisbon, like, I'd had sleepless nights about Cara Palmer's Car Alarm. That was a tough one for me. But Shirali Arloff.
I wanted to ask you how many times you had to do that, because it's in the blooper reel when Robin is trying to say those words. Yeah. And you have to drink that little tiny milk or whatever that is, and you open and close that refrigerator. Yeah. And I saw the bloopers, and you must have done it.
I think I did.
Times.
Yeah, it went into double digits for sure, and it was one of those things where I didn't even know if it was on camera because
it was funny because you would reset.
Because
it wasn't on camera because it was like just in that one shot.
It was just in that one shot, but
I think doing this, you keep opening and closing, and it was like you were rewinding Owen. Rewind.
I was trying to match it because I knew that when she came in, I had to turn around so that I was there with and I think it was like a mini Yakult. So, but
it could have used any of those.
Guys, that's a probiotic, right? So after 10 of those in a very short period of time, suffice to say, I wasn't very well, So that look of kind of like when Rigsby looks at it and goes, but they're really small.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't need another one of these. I just need to go and have a lie down. And those are the worst scenes because you have nothing to do with that scene. All you want is to not be a problem, especially if one of the actors who's got all the dialogue in the scene is struggling. So I was just trying to like,
unobtrusive.
Back we go. That's so funny. But was that an actively talked about thing on the production side, Nina? The names. I know that there's a good deal of difficulty sometimes in name clearance, but at times, and this was one of them, I feel like the names became almost deliberately strange.
This was an Owen Mahoney episode, so his episodes were always a little out there, and the names were always a little crazy. So I think he was doing it to you guys on purpose.
I think so too.
I think so too. Yeah.
I thought, would you like to have a quick stab at the synopsis, Tim?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Paint It Red, episode 13, directed by Dave Barrett, written by Owen Mahoney, the son-in-law of a wealthy executive, A.P. Cade, is murdered in his office. A $50 million painting, The Moreau, is also stolen from said office. The CBI team investigates, and a Russian oligarch / gangster, Shirali Arlov, is the prime suspect.
It's almost hilarious listening to that. It's like so crazy.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on
I
there.
almost need you to repeat the synopsis. I got lost halfway through the synopsis. I'm like, okay, right. What?
Now imagine trying to watch a 45-minute episode, you know? It's just like,
Oh.
what is going on?
Well, when we were prepping these things, we took them so seriously. Like
The way I just read it. Yeah, I'm trying to do it as seriously
And then
as
once you've got
possible.
past the impenetrable synopsis, you're like, so we start pushing in on Shirali Arlov. Wait there. On who now?
CBI Carl makes it into the, but he wasn't CBI Carl at the time. He
No.
was
Didn't talk
forensic tech Carl. He was the guy doing the fingerprint dusting.
I didn't see that.
And
I
Cho
missed
says, hey, Carl, bag this for me.
Tonally, a lot of shifts within this episode. So, you know, the fact that A.P. Cade was just a straight out and out hole, and that was who my money was on, just as a viewer coming in. I was like, oh, he's clearly just wanted to clear the decks for his daughter, doesn't like the scumbag husband, thinks he's beneath her. But of course, what became most informative about that relationship was the way that it was able to lens the loss that Patrick Jane has suffered, and the sort of the talking to that he gives to him at the end of the episode. Whilst half in jest, there was, as he acknowledges, a lot of truth in that too. Also, I felt like we were pushing the boundaries of network TV. I didn't realize you could show people doing drugs on a table on that, right?
Did that, and also the sexy scene at the beginning. Dave Barrett really pushed the
Really
envelope.
went there. Oh yeah.
Episode later on, I can't remember what season it was, and we had like 2 guest stars in a hotel room, and the underwear that she was wearing, like she was in a bra and panties, and it was too much butt cheek, and we spent so much money in visual effects adding more
Hanging it out.
underwear. So I was like, when I saw this episode, I was like, wow, we were a little raunchy there for
It did get super sexy, and one thing that I noticed about Dave is that he was someone who always managed to bring his flavor without disrupting the tone of The Mentalist. It felt younger, but it was quite sexy, and it still worked, and I quite liked it. And by comparison, we all felt a little bit like, you know, suddenly quite straight-laced when we came in. I felt like it was such a polar opposite to that beginning where it was like, wow.
He used to always like come in with like some crazy idea. Like he would pick a song. I remember one episode, it was that song that Rihanna and Eminem did together, and like he was obsessed with that music video, and like for the whole episode was like, this is what this episode is going to be. But he was so like passionate and excited about it. But that was very common for him. Like he would be like into one thing, like a song or a music video or something, and then he would base that whole episode on it. And so everybody kind of saw what his vision was while we were prepping his episodes, because that's what he
That
was
was his
into.
touchdown.
Very much a Dave Barrett thing.
Yeah.
Are you a musically oriented director? Do you find that that's a good way of being able to convey a mood or a feeling for you?
I do think it is. I use a lot of Shot Deck. For those people that don't know what that is, it's a database that has stills from like all of the movies and television shows that have been created. So you can like type in keywords, and I can put together like a presentation for my DP so that they could see what I'm going for in an episode, which I find is super helpful to convey what I'm wanting to do visually in that episode.
Yeah, because it must be one of the biggest challenges, I guess, is sort of trying to translate what's here out there and show people this is my vision.
Nina. So you have the shot deck, so you can actually, you know, take shots, that kind of thing. You go into storyboards at all? Like, and do you preconceive the shots that you want specifically, or do you just go with shot deck?
No. So for storyboarding, I do that depending on what the show is. Like this show that I'm on right now, I'm not storyboarding just because we don't have enough time. But on bigger shows, when I was doing like House of Dragon and The Last of Us, definitely like the key scenes, especially like when I was doing The Last of Us, when we were doing all of the water work. I storyboarded all of that stuff so that we could break it down, because all those scenes were shot in multiple places. Like, it was layer upon layer of layer. So being able to get everybody on the same page, storyboarding is definitely the easiest way to do that. And in House of Dragons, just trying to get everybody to kind of see my vision with the dragons, and you know, and how, like, especially in the dragon fights and stuff, how we want to make that happen. I usually start with the storyboards, and then the storyboards are given to our visual effects artists, and then they do a full previs. So then they previs all of them so that we can see it together. And then with the help of the visual effects guys, who are like, they're the geniuses behind the dragons, they help make it cohesive so that we can shoot it on the day. So storyboards are super, super helpful. And on the Mentalist, we would do storyboards for stunt sequences quite often. But other than that, usually it's just me drawing on my iPad where all the actors are going for the blocking, and then all my camera positions. And then
that was going to be my next question is, do you draw them yourself, or do you have an artist kind of conceive, or you describe it and the artist comes up with it, or sounds like you just hand draw everything?
Yeah, I'll show you one second.
Oh, perfect.
Those ears are still
Yeah, I know. They're not coming off. And you can see the movement too.
Keep them on for the rest of the season.
Especially when I'm talking like this. So Nina, yeah.
So you know, and another thing that I really loved about
Yeah.
Do you use you're on the iPad? Oh yeah, there you go. Oh
I am on the
yeah,
iPad.
right.
So that's typically what I'll do for every single scene. So I'll just put all the actors down. And then this one I don't have camera positions in yet because I was just doing it right before we were.
And what do you do for like shot sizes and composition and that kind of thing? Is that just something that you do on the fly with the DP, or what happens there?
I usually, well, it depends on if I'm prepping with a DP or not. But I just started using this new app that I really love called Shot Designer. And that is good because I could put my shot list in there. So when I can do it by setup. So I can do like a camera, 25 millimeter lens, medium wide shot. And then they can look at, based on my blocking floor plan and where the camera is. And then they'll see my shot list so that they can have the whole entire
You
thing.
can put it all together.
The script supervisor, the DP, and the first AD. Some shows there's just not enough time to physically type out a shot list, especially on like a show like this. I came into prep a little bit late, so I spend most of my time on the floor with the camera operators so that I'm just showing them exactly where I want the camera and how I want the shot.
Just because you touched on them, I'd love to just, whilst we're sort of diverting from the episode, as we always tend to do, I'd love for you to just talk quickly about The Last of Us and House of Dragon, because obviously they are two juggernaut shows. Last of Us, how many episodes have you directed of the show?
I did one episode of The Last of Us season 2.
Right.
I wasn't on season 1. I did the finale episode. And I did not think I was going to get The Last of Us. When I didn't know anything about the game. I watched season 1, but I didn't know, I didn't know Pedro Pascal's character was going to die in season 2. And when I went into the meeting, and Craig Mazin, who's amazing, he's the showrunner, he was like, in episode 2, Pedro dies. And I was like,
he dies?
Sure you want to do that? Are you did you guys fully think this through? And I was like, I got out of the meeting.
He's pretty popular right now. Maybe we should rethink this.
Yeah. And I called my managers. I'm like, I blew that. I'm like, there is no way I'm getting that show. That is.
Did you direct the episode where he gets killed?
No.
Oh God, they would never have forgiven you. Killed the internet's daddy. Ooh, girl.
I didn't get that one. And I was like, I'll never get it. And then, so I guess I pitched myself well enough to crack that. He ended up giving me the finale. So I went from I'm never getting that show to getting the finale. It was I was super, super excited. And then while I was shooting The Last of Us, that's when I got a call from Ryan, the showrunner over at House of Dragon. And, I interviewed with Ryan. He was looking for a director that he can bring on for season 3 that hopefully would be able to go on to season 4. The show's only supposed to be, or it's rumored to only be 4 seasons.
Sure.
And so I was super excited about that because, the Game of Thrones family was just like something that I could never even imagined I would be able to be a part of.
Mm.
So after I interviewed with Ryan and then Last of Us went well and then they gave me House of Dragon, that was just like really amazing. And I got to spend a year in London, which was so cool.
So
Um,
cool.
and then
Does it film in Ireland or does it film in London?
it films in London. We're at
Right.
Leaston Studios, Warner
Oh,
Brothers.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah. I always felt like almost every single person I went to drama school with is in that show. And obviously, when Game of Thrones was on, we were in The Mentalist. And I was like, guys, I'm pretty good with a sword. And, I'm quite a big guy. I'm not bad at the medieval stuff. So when I heard that there was like 4,000 spin-offs, I was like, right, okay, now is the time. Come on.
I'm coming in.
I mean, even my last name, Sir Owain of Yeoman. Come on. Did you work with Pedro on The Mentalist?
I wasn't directing them, but yeah, he was around because he got Game of Thrones while we were shooting his arc.
Right, because it's so
Really?
funny, isn't it? I remember
That was during that time.
Mentalist really was, at the time, no one knew who Pedro Pascal was.
No.
And that was after my time. And I'd come back to do the season finale and someone had said, oh, well, then Lisbon has a love interest. I was like, Lisbon has a love interest? Not Patrick Jane. And they were like, oh, yeah, she goes off with this guy Pike. And I remember looking him up and going, oh, that's Oberon from Game of Thrones. And because at the time he'd become this icon, because obviously he was a very handsome guy and a fabulous actor, but he had this iconic death scene. And it's all after the most insanely choreographed sword fight that you've ever seen. And he's so balletic in it and it's so amazing. But that was the beginning, I think, of the start of the Pedro Pascal craze, right?
It was the very, very beginning.
And now you'll struggle to go see something that he isn't in. So
I know.
yeah.
Literally in everything. I'm like, how does he even have enough
Seriously.
time to shoot all of these shows and movies? It's crazy.
So funny. But there is there was definitely a Dave Barrett touch to this episode. And I feel like at the time that we're in within the show, we're trying things on. Do you know what I mean? And I think early on we're pushing the limits of what the show could be. So I did appreciate the playfulness of it. I have to make a few honorable shout outs. The kid who was anyone else as freaked out about the kid who was posing for the portrait as I was? There was such a weird poltergeist vibe about her. No disrespect to the actress. It was just the setup. She was dressed in this weird 1920s.
Now, are you talking about the kid or are you talking about the painting? Because the painting scared the bejesus out of me.
I mean, both. It was both subject and art were terrifying. And the funny thing is that the guy who was sketching it looked like he'd never done a drawing in his life.
Ever.
Yeah, when you can see the difference between.
That guy is Tiffany Thiessen's husband.
He looked very familiar. I don't know why I knew him, but he did.
He is.
That made me laugh a lot. And also I thought that we did take slight liberties with when we first push into the fake and they establish what the fake is. I thought it was going to be something super subtle, like a different brush stroke or, maybe, he never uses gold in his paint. No, it was a TV antenna. Now,
I wanted to ask you about
bold.
that, Owen. Now, is that, they use the term aerial. Is that a Britishism, which I believe it is?
Right? Oh, you guys don't say television aerial?
No.
No, you just
antenna?
used antenna, which is what we use.
Well, I mean, with your antenna, it's like, yeah. I mean, I guess we say aerial. Yeah, the aerial, and that was the term that we used in the episode, aerial.
Yeah, and so that was the how we have Britishisms that come through in our episodes. That was also.
Were you aware of those, Nina? Was there any ever?
Oh yeah, I was always we don't talk like that, and they would.
Right. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Who checks that? Does the studio ever come back and go, Bruno, that's very British?
Every once in a while, I always was they'd always get annoyed with me, the writers, because I was the character police. I would be no, Cho would never say something like that, or Rigsby wouldn't say that, or no, Van Powell wouldn't do that. They were just because I was, so obsessed with the show the whole entire time. And they would
but you need someone like
you
that,
have
don't
to
you?
have
You have to have that kind of through line. I remember having a lot of fun on this episode. I remember it being, and I think that's credit also to Dave Barrett, who kept a very light, very energetic, fun set. I also had a lot of fun seeing, and this was just a kick that I got, the bodyguard who lets Jane into Shirali Arloff's
Wait, who is that?
mansion/hotel is a guy called Joe, and he was my stunt double for years
Oh, that's why
prior
I
to
was
The
like, he's so
Mentalist.
familiar.
He was very familiar, and he was always around. But I felt really bad because I lost a considerable amount of weight during The Mentalist, and so he basically came up to me and accosted me years later. He went, "Yeah, you basically put me out of a job because you got too skinny for me to play you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry about that." But sweet guy. And I remember seeing him open the door, and I was like, "Oh, that's so funny." And if I were to pick out two words that I can remember most vividly, and I think it was courtesy of the blooper reel, it was Frisky Frank. You remember how many times poor Simon struggled to say that? So then Frisky Frank takes the paint.
There was one moment where I felt, at least in this episode, and it happens every once in a while, where Simon peeks out of Jane, and Simon came through in the beginning. I think it was the beginning when he when he's talking to the guy who was getting sexy with the receptionist at the beginning. He says, "Knowingly record yourself making love." Right when he says love, I was like, that's no longer Jane. That's Simon saying that. And then he went right back into it. It was really interesting.
Well, I think to go back to your word, Nina, I think part of the success of the show, well, a huge part of the success of the show, certainly a successful part of Jane, was that cheekiness. And that was hard to know where Simon ended and where Patrick Jane began. And I think when you meet with someone, it can go one of two ways. Look at the Arloff situation. This is a guy who walks in and tells them, "Oh, I'm law enforcement and I've come here." And then he takes off the picture. He's like, "Look at that picture." Now, at that point, you would think a Russian mobster would be like, "Just, I'm done with this guy." But somehow he still manages to walk out with a nice glass of sparkling water, room temperature, no ice. It is amazing what that kind of self-assurance can do. And I think that was why Simon aced that role. This was one of the episodes that I felt the final culprit was much better hidden than some. I think some of the red herrings were not so great, but I did not suspect right up until the last minute that it was going to be the art broker.
No,
who
I thought
was
it was
sort of.
daughter.
I did too.
Can you guys explain to me what was the painting switch? I didn't quite
I was going to ask you about that.
Get that. Did you see that where he sandwiched the paintings together and then he gave it a little shake?
I'm trying to remember because
what
I
was
just
that?
remember being
What was the
in
gig
show and
there?
tells, like trying to figure this out. And I think if
You
I
remember?
that front part, the drawing part, was like two-sided, and when he like smacked it together, it transferred onto the other painting, and then he swapped it. Is how I think it happened. But honestly, when I was just watching it, I was like, what did he just do?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a perfect example of if you do something with enough finesse, you just buy it. Like, because you went, and you were like, "Oh,
I guess he switched.
He shimmied it. He shimmied it.
Yeah.
My assumption was that the drawing was on the one side and the fake painting was on the other. In putting it together, in some way, we were supposed to believe. But I'm sure there had been some.
But you're talking out of your ass right
I'm
now.
totally talking out of my. But like, you got no right to call me out with those great big reindeer things on your head.
That's what makes it better.
I know, it really does. This has been such a pleasure chatting with you, Nina. You are just a joy, and we are both so thrilled for your success and deserve it. We wish you all of the best, all of our love for the baby. Please send Julian our love. A very happy holiday, whatever holiday you are celebrating.
That's right.
And I'll leave you with this. Let it show, let it show, let it show.